This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at the BatmanUniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
In 2008, a podcast was created with one goal: to bring Bat fans around the world news related to movies, comics, video games, television, merchandise, and so much more. And now, the Batman Universe Podcast has returned.
Hello everyone, welcome to the latest episode of the TBU Podcast. I'm Dustin, and joining me today is BJ, and we have kind of an interesting thing here planned. Originally, we were going to talk about holiday gifts and kind of things that we'd like to see, things that we've gotten in the past, and we're still going to do that. We also have a news brief, specifically talking about the Batgirl movie, but we're also going to talk about kind of our favorite Batman toys as well. This is something that could be reoccurring over multiple episodes with the other co-hosts, but today it's just BJ and myself, and we're going to talk about that. So let's start off with talking about a Batman toy that you can remember from your childhood that you really, really, really wanted, and you just happened to get it.
So my favorite toy as a kid was my Batman big wheel. I was looking at pictures today. Let me pull it up. It's by Play School, 16-inch Batman cycle. This thing, I rode this thing up and down my street. I don't know how many times, back and forth. It's got a blue handle. It's got like pictures of Batman on the wheel. The seat had Batman on it. It felt like you were on the Bat cycle. To me, it did as a youngster growing up in Fall River, Massachusetts. I don't know, it's something I've always remembered and it's been my go-to. As when people say, what's your favorite Batman thing you had growing up? Even searching for looking for the picture of the old school Batman big wheel, Batman big wheel, and the things that these kids have now, it's like, it looks like legit Batmobiles that they have. So it's like, missed the mark by about 20 years. It could have been driving around in something that's close to a Batmobile, but back then in the early to mid 90s, that felt like the Batmobile, my Play School 16-inch Batman big wheel.
Yeah. Funny story, my cousin actually had one of those big wheels as a kid. I don't know if it's the exact same one, but I remember him having one of those giant big wheels that had Batman theming on it. So my favorite item as a kid that I got that was Batman related is actually when I was a little bit older. When I was a kid, I had lots of different action figures, but it was more like very piecemeal. I had, a figure from this line. I had a figure from that line. I had a random real Ghostbusters. I had a random Batman from the animated series. Then the movies came out. I had a couple figures from Batman Forever, but I didn't have a very good line of toys that were all from the same thing. It was a very big mix. I had some Ninja Turtles. I had all kinds of different stuff, but nothing that was really the same. Well, when I was, probably 11 or 12 years old, Batman and Robin was coming out, and when Batman and Robin came out, this was about the time that people stopped wanting to buy actual gifts and just started giving money. And I remember I had a bunch of money left over from returns, or I don't know, it must have just been birthday money or holiday money or something like that, because I can't really recall where else it would have come from, but I had enough to buy a ton of the stuff from the Batman and Robin line. I had not only Poison Ivy and Mr. Freeze and Bane, I also had the Batman that you could push down his head and you could put the cowl on, so that way you could turn Batman into Bruce Wayne just by removing his cowl. I had a Robin, I had a Batgirl. As long as I had one of every of the main figures from the movie, that's all I cared about. But the best part was that I had enough money to get the Batmobile from the line, and that was something that like I was thrilled for, because it was the first time I had like a real vehicle from anything. But then on top of that, then for a present, I actually got the play set, the Batman and Robin Wayne Manor. Now, this is a set that they reused like a million times, and they just repainted it depending on what movie was coming out. But this specific version had the Wayne Manor, and it had the Batcave, and the way it worked was it was like the building itself looked like the outside of Wayne Manor, and then you would unclip it and they would unfold, and then you'd have like a little area inside Wayne Manor where you could have like a little spot where you could go through the bookcase and you could get into the Batcave, and then the Batcave itself had like, you know, the rock wall and stuff, and then there was like a big garage door for the Batmobile. It's super cool. And then on the outside of the play sets, so like on the back side, if it was all collapsed, was it was basically supposed to be Mr. Freeze's hideout, but it was just basically any kind of normal industrial factory type place with some railings. It had a railing that would fall, and you push a button and the railing would, or the platform itself would like collapse down so the villain would fall. And I'm pretty sure it's the exact same one that they used all the way from back when they did the playset for Batman 89, because it makes perfect sense, because the Joker, or Jack Napier in that movie, would have been up on the platform and then he fell into the tank below, and that's exactly the same thing that they had for this playset. And they probably had it for all of them. I had it for Batman and Robin, and I had this for the longest time. I don't have it anymore. I went through a period in my 20s where I tried to sell off a bunch of my stuff just to free up space, and I stupidly sold off all my Batman and Robin toys. And not that, hindsight 2020, the movie's not great, but I cared more about having the line of toys.
Awesome,
yeah, exactly. I cared more about having the line of toys and having a complete set of like characters so that I could actually reenact scenes and things like that. That's what I was most concerned with. But it was also it was the first major playset for any line of figures that I had ever had. I never had like the turtle sewer layer for Ninja Turtles, or the Ghostbuster house for Ghostbusters. Even though I had figures and I had a variety of different stuff, I never had like an actual playset. So that was like my first playset. And like now, as a parent, my kids have playsets so they could care less. I bought them. My son a couple years ago got the Batman v Superman playset, which was super hard to find because they didn't really advertise it. It was only available at Walmart. Mattel put it out, and it kind of felt like last minute because it was coming out for the holiday season, but the movie came out back in March, and they never released it up until right before the holidays. I got it, and it's actually a really cool set. It's like very big. It's like 4 feet tall. It's super cool, but he could care less when I got it for him. He was just the wrong age. But now they play with it, so at least I have that. But I always loved the play sets because they're just so much different than just having like a bunch of the same exact figure.
Definitely. I had the Ghostbusters play set.
Oh, lucky.
I would use that as when I would play with my Batman figures. I would use that as Wayne Manor.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do. I mean, that's the way it goes. You can't have every playset. All right, so let's talk about. Let's jump around for a second. Let's talk about 2021. Obviously, we're still Bat fans. We're still wanting Bat items, but we're a different type of collector. Obviously, we're not going to necessarily want the same action figures that we wanted as kids. We're not necessarily going to want the same type of items. We're not looking for a big wheel unless we were looking for a kid in our lives. But the question, I guess, presents now is, in 2021, what kind of items are you looking to get for the holiday season?
I would have to say, surrounded by Funko Pops, much to my wife's chagrin. But what are you going to do? It's better than spend your money on other stuff, I guess. So I guess I draw the line where with the really expensive like statues that they come out that are upwards of $100. So I tell my wife to get a $100 statue or a $10 Funko Pop. But the statues that I always see are the that recreate the cover to New Teen Titans 1, the George Perez cover with Robin, Flash, and Wonder Girl, and that team, Cyborg, Beast Boy, and Raven. They're the ones that you can like set up together that look exactly like that cover. And I look online, like on eBay, and it's like $500 for the whole set used. I mean, like maybe that's cheaper, but still, I don't want to spend 3 digits on a statue. But maybe one day, but not right now. Definitely not right now.
Yeah, I can see. I mean, the one downfall is every piece of merchandise that gets announced goes across my desk, because all of the merch articles that we have on the site, I edit every single one of those, so I know exactly every single item that's coming out. And there is some amazing looking statues that I think to myself, wow, that'd be awesome to have. And then you look at the price tag and they're like $1,200. Yeah, no. And I'm not even one to buy, like you said, same thing. Like, I don't have my main collection of stuff that I own. I used to collect a ton of the action figures as part of like the DC Multiverse line before it was called that Mattel was putting out. And then they switched over and to McFarlane Toys just last year. And prior to when it was still Mattel, I was collecting a ton of them, and it got to the point where I couldn't keep up, mostly because it was very difficult to find a lot of the figures. I live in not urban area, but a suburban area, and because of that, there's lots of retailers you can find the items at, but you can't find the figures that you want because there's plenty of people who just coast around to the retailers, picking them up to sell them on the secondhand market. And I unfortunately did not want to pay secondhand prices or second market prices for some of these figures. It just wasn't worth it to me to get them. So I ended up falling off of those. But the one thing that I have been collecting for a very long time is Batman Lego sets. And I do not open them, and my wife absolutely despises, because we are a Lego family through and through, but she despises that I spend as much money as I do on Lego sets to keep them in a box that are in another box in a storage room, and that's where they stay. So the item that I would want this year specifically is that just so happens that the beginning of November, they pre-released all of the sets for the Batman movie that's coming out in March, and all of these new sets are coming out. And while eventually I'll try to get them all, because that's the point of collecting in my world, is you gotta get them all. And but the one set that I really would like to get for the holiday season is the one that is the most expensive of the bunch, which is the Technic Batmobile. It is an insane, ginormous display of the Batmobile. It's not the biggest Batmobile, because there are bigger Batmobiles. They've done the Tumbler, they've done the 1989 Batmobile, they did the Batwing from the 1989 film, so there's lots of other bigger displays. But this one, because it's Technic, it is, I don't know, there's something different about it because it's Technic. If you don't have any idea what I'm talking about, it's because you're not from the world of Legos and you don't know what I'm talking about. But Technic is like, it's like a more adult version of it. There's a lot more pieces, and it's much more intricate than just being a display piece, and that's why. But there's a selfish reason for me wanting that specific set, and that's because it's the most expensive of the group. So that way I just don't have to buy the other. I can buy the other sets, but they're not as expensive.
Recently, they've had those the ones where the Lego sets where you can build a cowl.
Yep.
You have those, I assume?
I do, yes. And it's funny because I thought those were interesting because they're great display pieces. Like I said, I don't take my stuff out, but my son, he's got plenty of sets that my son is 11, so he's got plenty of sets where he takes them out, he builds them, and he puts them on display. And I think he got a Star Wars one of those. I don't remember which one, but it was a Star Wars, either like a Stormtrooper or a Scout Trooper or something like that. And he built it, and then immediately he found out that there was Marvel ones, and then he found out there was Batman ones, and he has both of the Batman ones on his list. So eventually, at some point in the near future, he's probably going to be getting those, and then we'll be building them, and I can enjoy building and let's just put it. I play with them. There's nothing wrong with that. You build them, you play with them, and those are display pieces. But it's fun building the sets, and I can live vicariously through his Legos while keeping my Legos very safe in the packages.
That's part of the reason is you got to live through them. I know my wife always says, like, what if our kids don't like Batman books and all that? And I'm like, well, they're going to have to.
Exactly.
They're going to be surrounded by it.
The thing is, like, I've come to learn from having my own kids that you can't force them to like something, but there's no reason you can't sway their decision-making process getting stuff. Like, when my son was really small, it was either you could do Marvel or Hasbro was making a line of like miniature figures that were like preschool age that were Star Wars, and they also had Marvel. Meanwhile, Fisher-Price was making the Imaginext figures that featured a lot of the DC characters. I just stick with the Imaginext, and then when people ask, "Oh, what should I get them?" you just tell them to get them that, and then they come to love it anyway. So eventually, they get old enough and they'll choose whatever they want. I mean, my son likes Marvel stuff just as much as DC stuff, which there's nothing. I have no problem with that. I love watching the Marvel stuff just as much as the DC stuff too. And he likes Star Wars, and I appreciate the fact that he just likes the geeky pop culture stuff that I like. That's all I really can hope for. So there's that. To wrap up kind of the gift stuff and the holiday stuff, I wanted to go back to kind of our childhoods and talk about some of our favorite Batman items that we had. Obviously, we talked about our favorite item that we had, but what was some of the other items that you remember from your childhood that even years later you still remember, hey, I had this thing was awesome, and and either you wish you still had it or you still do have it, just put away somewhere?
I have two. When I was a kid, I had the Superpowers Robin figure with the short green pants with the karate chop and the yellow cape. I still have that figure, but I lost the cape. Those capes you can never hold on to those. But I ended up a couple maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I was at the mall, and they had the store, the Toy Vault. Okay, and they had that was back in. They had that same figure in the package and everything. I don't know if it was like a re-release or something, but I immediately get that right away. And then other figure I have that I bought again at the same Toy Vault was the Tim Drake Robin when it was from part of the Batman Returns line. When the Batman Returns toys came out, and I had that as a kid, played with that all the time. Lost it as a kid when you move houses and stuff. And then lucky enough at the Toy Vault, immediately had to get that one again. So those are my action figures that I remember as a kid. Definitely the Karate Chop Robin was probably my favorite, even though his arm for years stopped really karate chopping. But
those springs, they just go out.
Yeah.
So this is a weird one. I was just trying to pull up a picture of it to figure out how to describe it. There was a line of figures, and I believe it was called Legends of the Dark Knight. They weren't the same scale as all the other figures. They weren't the same scale as like the movie figures or the animated series figures. They were like taller figures. And for some reason, I remember getting, this was a couple years after I got that Batman Robin stuff, but it was a bat cycle that looked like a bat. It literally looked like somebody took a bat, smushed it, and slapped some wheels on the underside of the bat. And the nose shot like a missile, and it had the wings, I think, actually expanded out. Like they acted as shields while the Batman figure was sitting in the bat cycle. But the wings, they like popped up. I don't know what the purpose of it, but I remember these figures they were at least like 2 inches taller than all the other figures, and I thought it was the dumbest thing because the figure that came with that bat cycle, it like towered over the other figures, and I hated that so much because more of a, as an OCD person, it's difficult to have figures that are all the same height across your entire collection. And then all of a sudden you have one figure that's like super tall, and yet you really like the vehicle, because it's so different and unique and perfect comparison. If anybody out there has seen the McFarlane Toys Dark Knight's Metal Bat Cycle that they released, it's a bat, but it's like a skeleton of a bat as part of the motorcycle. I guess quick plug, we'll be actually releasing a TBU merch review for that exact bat cycle this coming week, so be sure to check that out. But the vehicle looked really cool. It looked amazing. It just, the figure that came with it and trying to put other figures on it, it was horribly in size. The size was horrible in comparison. So I remember having that. One of the other things that I had, it's not so much like a action figure or a toy or anything, but one of the things that got me really into Batman in general was, at one year, and this was a Christmas present, someone that my mom knew bought me a subscription to a Batman comic book. And it was the Batman comic book that was specifically tied to the animated series. So it was, I believe it was the Batman Adventures or the Batman Adventure Continues. I conveniently picked up at like issue 34. It ended with issue 36. And then it went into like a 5-issue miniseries that was called The Lost Years, which was basically what happened after the animated series, but before the new Batman Adventures started up. And it kind of like filled in the dots of how Tim Drake became Robin, how Nightwing became Nightwing, what happened with Batgirl. It was a really interesting miniseries. It's also interesting because back then, subscriptions, you could pay a fraction of the cover price for a subscription. Every single month they would mail it directly from DC to you, but they weren't always going to come in perfect condition because they're coming in the mail. So we all know how our mail comes to us. It doesn't always come in a great position. But I beat the heck out of those comics. I read those comics so many times, like just learning about it. And I will admit, prior to that, I had seen the animated series. It did not connect with me at all. I was just the wrong age for when I started watching it, and it didn't really connect. But these comics, it was so interesting that I come to find out that Dick Grayson was replaced by somebody else and all of this. And that miniseries, then it branched off and became in the style of the new Batman Adventures. And I had those comics for the longest time and kept renewing the subscriptions for years. And even after whoever the person was who bought it for me, they stopped getting it, I started renewing them for at least a while. Got out of it when I was in high school, but when I moved out of my house, I looked back into it to see if they still had subscriptions. And for the first year after I was living by myself, I actually subscribed to probably like 6 different Batman series that DC was releasing through the subscription form. But it was a headache for collecting because they arrived in horrible condition half the time. While you could call a number and they would send you a replacement, it was a crapshoot on whether the replacement was going to come in good condition too. But it was always great because almost every single week I would have like 2 comic books coming in the mail, even if they were later than everyone else was getting them. At that time, I wasn't paying attention to the stuff online to know whether or not, to know the storylines and all the stuff that was happening. But it was like every 2 weeks or every week I get 2 comics in the mail, and it was awesome. It was really cool. It just reminded me of my childhood of getting that like single comic and looking forward to when the next one was going to come in 4 more weeks. It was awesome.
Yeah, I had always wanted to do that. Subscribe to like the mail-in service and come in the mail like it was a Sports Illustrated or something. But yeah. I never did that. But I had those issues, the Lost Years issues. I had them in single issue.
Yeah.
I must have lost them when I was a kid or somebody, but I found them all back in. I got the trade paperback. I read that right. That was a good little miniseries.
Yeah, it was. And it's surprising because nowadays the tie-in stuff that happens whenever they have an animated series, if they even do a tie-in nowadays, the last 10 years, if they were doing a tie-in series, it was just standalone stories. It wasn't really adding anything at all to the cartoons or the animated stuff that they were putting out. It had nothing to do with it other than it was just added adventures. And that, I think, is one of the only ones outside of like something like Mad Love that released, which obviously introduced Harley Quinn, that really defined the comics as a matter of importance when it came to tie-in material for the television series. So that's always cool. So, all right. So with that, we're going to jump into our news brief. We've got a little bit of a new thing. We talked about this before back on movie news for DC Fandom, but the Batgirl movie, we have not talked a lot about this, but supposedly it is coming in 2022, which is hard to comprehend considering there are so many DC movies already coming in 2022 in theaters. This one, however, is supposed to be an HBO Max exclusive. It'll be exclusive on the service. That's not to say it couldn't get a release in other countries that HBO Max has yet to launch in, but it is intended, at least here in North America, as a HBO Max exclusive. This film is... There's a lot to talk about here, and while we don't have our entire panel, BJ and I are going to talk about it because there's this little news thing that came out where one of the directors, they actually posted a post on Instagram that showcases that they have officially started filming. They showed the clapboard with the Batgirl logo. The Batgirl logo horribly is the logo from the Batgirl run of Gail Simone, which I tried to blank out from my memory. I don't want to remember that, so I don't like that they're using that logo. That's not to say that they will use that logo down the line, but there's that. And then the only other thing that you can even make out outside of it looks like it's taking place during the holiday season, which to me hints at the fact that if this is true, there's a very good chance that we could be getting this next December, because that would be the holiday season. Why not have a movie that is based in the holidays around the holidays? So they could time that very well. But the other thing that is worth mentioning is that there's a nameplate that says Officer Barbara Gordon. That kind of begs the question of, why is she an officer? She's never been a police officer in normal continuity, that is. And we're going to be seeing that. There's other questions. J.K. Simmons is reprising his role of Commissioner Gordon. He previously played Commissioner Gordon in Batman v Superman, specifically the Justice League film, as part of that same group of films. And he's coming back, which is slightly surprising because they're not doing anything else. They're not holding back on any. They're not pulling anything else back from that continuity except for that character. So that's interesting. There's a bunch of questions that are presented. Who's the Batman in this world? Obviously, I would assume Batman exists. How can you go an entire film talking about a Barbara Gordon becoming Batgirl, her dad being in the film, and not address the giant elephant in the room, which is, well, Batman must exist because there's no Batgirl without Batman, and Commissioner Gordon, there's no reason to bring J.K. Simmons back if it doesn't have something to do with that other version of Batman. So there's lots of things to talk about here, so let's talk about them. What do you want to talk about first?
Let's start with the officer, Barbara Gordon. I know in Batgirl Year One, she tries out to be a cop.
Yes.
I don't remember if she doesn't pass or her father kind of her results of them because he doesn't want her on the force. If I'm remembering that right, it's been a while since I read that. I might have to read it before the movie. I know in Lego Batman, Barbara Gordon was Commissioner Gordon, but interesting. I guess they don't want to make her a librarian. That's what she usually is. And I mean, who's going to libraries anymore? I'm sure if a kid watches this movie, they don't even know what a library is. Why doesn't she just sell books on Amazon or something?
That is such a true statement, yet such a horrible statement at the same time.
2021.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I guess, is she going to be a cop / Batgirl, or is she going to leave the force because happy with the way things are, and then she becomes a vigilante? Maybe that's going to play a part in it. So, I guess I'm interested to see how that will play out.
Yeah, I really hope. I have hope for this movie because I like the fact that they're expanding the Bat family in film. I love that. Hands down, that's probably the best thing about this project. I'm concerned about the direction of what they're attempting to do, specifically because there has been some other incarnation. There's been incarnations of Barbara Gordon. especially within the last 10 years, that I don't think are the best interpretations of the character. They're going for Batgirl, not Oracle. So they're not going to go the route, or I mean, they could end up doing something where she becomes Oracle in the future if that's the route they choose to go. But I don't think that's going to happen in this first film. The thing that's interesting is when you do a little bit of research about her being a police officer, the one thing that pops up is in the Lego Batman movie, which I will say I love that movie, but they took a lot of liberties in that movie to make it make sense for kids. She was a police officer who did not like Batman at all, and then ended up becoming Batgirl later in the film because she was inspired by Batman, like the comics, but she was originally a police officer. There's been plenty of stories where she becomes the commissioner, or she becomes she becomes a figurehead in the GCPD, but that is well after her tenure as Batgirl. It's not during her tenure. There, you were talking about Batgirl Year One. That is true. She did take the exam. Her dad dissuaded her from joining the force because he did not want her around the situations that were occurring, because let's be honest, Gotham's not exactly a great place for someone to be a vigilante or a police officer for that matter. So there's that. So my concern is I really don't want them to take too many liberties for a character that, one, this is a really prominent role, opportunity for this character to be seen by a lot more people. And the last thing I would want is a repeat of what they did with Alicia Silverstone in Batman Robin. Not that I think she did a bad job, the actress. It's not against her. It's the way they wrote the character. She was the niece, if I remember correctly, of Alfred, rather than being related to Jim Gordon at all. She shows up. Uncle Alfred is somehow, he's sick. She gets a suit because she's able to hack into Uncle Alfred. So there's at least the hacking stuff, but it was so far removed from what her to be, it makes no sense. Now here we can at least know that she's Barbara Gordon, not Barbara Pennyworth or something like that. So there's that, but I really I want them to be true to at least the principles of the character. And if they decide to tell their own version of how a villain came to be, I mean, let's be honest, Killer Moth shows up in the film, I'll be happy. Do I care how they explain who Killer Moth is? No, not really. He's not a big enough villain for them to mess with the origin and really for me to have a really big concern about it. But I really just hope that they do the character justice without having to manipulate the story too much, because my other concern is Christina Hodson is the writer, or at least she wrote the screenplay for the film. She also happened to do the Birds of Prey movie that came out in early 2020. And I'll be honest, she took some liberties with some certain characters on there. Randomly, Cassandra Cain was plopped in that movie and didn't make any sense for her to be it. Was not that character in any way outside of her name, and that she was an Asian girl. And that's kind of messed up when you think about it. So I hope that it's not that kind of situation. I hope that it's something really good. And I have some faith that it could be. But I'm kind of... That picture of just the first thing we released from the film, it's being Officer Barbara Gordon. It concerns me.
It is strange how that's the first thing they release. I know on Fandom they had concept art of Batgirl on a rooftop.
Yeah,
that looked pretty legit.
Yeah, standing on a gargoyle.
That gave me some. And I mean, Brandon Fraser. I don't know if we talked about this yet, but Brandon Fraser is signed as the villain. Firefly, right? Not Killer Moth?
They didn't specifically say. I think there was a lot of contradictions. He signed on to be the villain, is the original report. Then some other site said he signed on to be Firefly. And then some other people were saying it's not Firefly, it's just Killer Moth. They just didn't know who Killer Moth was. So, and then I've also seen some things saying that he could be just a mob boss. It could be something like that regard instead of being an actual villain from the Rogues Gallery, and he's just in the film as, kind of like how we saw Maroni in The Dark Knight, where he has a prominent role, but he's not the focus of the Joker or eventually Two-Face. So
I do like how it's a more of a B-list, C-list villain, and not like she's facing Two-Face or
yes,
Mr. Freeze or Joker right away.
absolutely,
because that's how Batgirl started.
I cannot agree more. I mean, I would love, like, even if it was Firefly, I think Killer Moth would be perfect because it works with Batgirl Year One, and I hope they're looking at that comic and using that comic because it would make the most sense to use that as some sort of a basis behind what they're doing, rather than using like Burnside Batgirl or the Batgirl from the New 52, the early New 52 issues, because that's not the Batgirl that I think a lot of people associate Barbara Gordon with. They associate her as either Oracle if they're involved with the comics, or it's the version that was Batgirl Year One, essentially based off of what we've seen in the animated series and things like that. I will say that Firefly, even if it ends up being Firefly and not Killer Moth, I would be 100% okay with that because, again, neither one of those villains is going to show up as anything more than just a side supporting main character, so side character supporting a main character in a Batman film. They're just not big enough to really warrant, hey, we make a Batman movie like every 3 or 4 years. Let's make Firefly the main villain. It's just, I hate to say it. I mean, for people who are huge fans of Firefly or Killer Moth, but it's just not going to happen. So this is a perfect opportunity to expand the villains we've seen on screen, because why not? I mean, and that's nothing against like Batgirl couldn't take on, the bigger villains like Two-Face or something. She certainly could, but I think it's important to have a character who in some ways is a supporting character to Batman fighting a supporting villain, not a main villain. I think it would be cooler to tell a really cool, unique story using that method. But yeah, let's switch over to the Batman. I want to get to this. Which Batman you think it's going to be?
Back when I was like a huge continuity nerd and everything had to like line up, I would have been like, it has to make sense that it's Affleck. It's Jake Simmons is Gordon. That was Gordon was Affleck's. Simmons was Affleck's Gordon. So it has to line up. But I guess at this point, especially with DC, how everything they've kind of bungled the movies. I mean, let's call it what it is. How they're never going to catch Marvel. So just make good movies at this point. So even show like whatever Batman it is. Can it be Keaton? I guess, but Keaton's in his 70s.
Yeah,
so it's very strange.
I think the only thing I can think of is one. I am saying 100% there's no way it's Pattinson. And I say that because obviously there's a different Gordon in his universe. We know that Matt Reeves is creating his own stuff that's separate from everything else going on, and I'm completely okay with that. I think that's a good way to go because he can tell stories without having to worry about the larger overconnectedness of everything else. And I say that when it comes to comics too. I mean, obviously when you're telling a Batman story, you want to tell a Batman story that's centric on Gotham City characters, not let's throw all the other Justice League characters in. It's cool to see that, but it's not the focus of a Batman movie, in my opinion. That said, I hope that Matt Reeves has every intention of expanding the universe that he's creating and having more characters pop up and things like that. We know he's planning a trilogy. We know that there's lots of talk about having spin-off series. We already know there's the GCPD series. We know that there's a potential Penguin series for HBO Max. So, I'm all for expanding the Reeves universe when it comes to the Batman stuff and doing really cool stuff. However, there is still a Batman that exists when it comes to the Justice League, and I think that this Batgirl, if this is the Batgirl that's connected to it, why not make it make sense? And the way I think you could make it make sense is with J.K. Simmons playing Gordon. I think the way you do it is the Flash movie, of course, is supposed to come out in November of next year. This movie, if it really does, like I'm predicting, come out in like a December time frame for 2022, or even maybe right after, maybe early 2023, and you could still play into the holiday stuff, even if it did come out after the holidays. But if you did that, you could explain it with whatever they're doing with the multiverse stuff in Flash. When he comes back and everything gets set back, you have certain characters that are staying put. You have other characters that are not. They did say that there's definitively a Batman in this. They know that there's a Batman, whether or not they've cast that Batman or they have an idea for it. I don't think it's going to be Affleck. I don't think it's going to be Keaton. And I know for a fact it's not going to be Pattinson, because I don't think they're going to try to explain the Reeves stuff being intertwined with all of the Justice League stuff at the same time as what he's trying to accomplish. I don't think that makes sense. However, there's no reason there can't be another Batman. You could say that the Robert Pattinson Batman is taking place on Earth 2 or Earth 1. It doesn't make a difference, because I don't know that they're actually going to explicitly say which Earths they are. And then you could do the Justice League stuff, have a new Batman. When Flash comes back, maybe he meets the new Batman that takes the place of Affleck when it comes to these Justice League films. So that way you can have an Affleck, or you can have somebody who's standing in for Affleck once he comes back and explains why the character has been recast. Because I think that's the route to go with having Batman involved with these other films as a more of a supporting character, while the Reeves films has Batman as the main character. And then you could have that Batman pop up in this Batgirl series or something like that. But I don't know that it's going to be this massive giant star like Ben Affleck was when he was cast. I think it's going to be somebody who's maybe starting out, big enough star to like big enough where they've had roles, but maybe not, maybe somebody that not a lot of people are even thinking of as a possibility, I think.
I would agree with that. I mean, it is tough, because I think we'll know more after the Flash movie how everything's going to set up. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the writer of the Flash movie is the same writer, Hodgson. Is that what you said?
Hodgson, yeah, Christina Hodgson. I'm not sure if she's writing the Flash movie, though. That's a good question, because I'm not exactly sure who is, but I will find out in about 3 seconds. It is being written by... you were absolutely right, Christina Hodgson. So yeah, she's involved in that too. I did not know that. I do know that I'm not sure how I did not know that ahead of time. I mean, I know that the director, Andy Muschietti, I think is how you pronounce it. I'm probably butchering that, but I know that he had said something in an interview about how they took this, they were like playing with the script to like make it work for whatever they were doing. So it might be the original concept might have been written by her, but maybe they adapted it or something like that. But I did not hear anything. It said that, but now that I'm looking at of course I'm looking back at the wiki link on here, and it says that the Muschietti and Hodgson joined the film in July of 2019 together at the same time. So maybe that is what happened. And it's interesting because that was before Birds of Prey came out, but it was obviously after she had already wrote that. When she was doing press for Birds of Prey, she specifically was asked about the Batgirl film, and she said she had an idea for a Batgirl film as well. So, I mean, giving her 3 films before the first film even came out, I mean, they were very high on liking what she was producing. Personally, I don't think Birds of Prey was in that really that great. I think it introduced some characters that I hope pop up at some point, but I don't think it was overall a really good movie.
Birds of Prey, I thought it was okay. It wasn't gonna break any grounds. I mean, the Huntress was strange, like you said. Cassandra Cain was strange, and so yeah, Evan Hodgson kind of. They gave her she's got some playing around to do. And maybe she's building her own little universe. So I think we'll definitely know more after the Flash movie, where all the DC pieces lay, that aren't to the Reeves films.
All right. So with that is going to wrap up this episode. Hopefully, with the holidays upon us, you guys are interested in certain items. Just as a quick plug, if you are shopping for items for yourself or for other people, we do have on our support page, we do have affiliate links to a wide variety of different retailers. If you are using any of those retailers, please take a moment to just click on those. We have links for Amazon, the Lego Shop, Sideshow Collectibles, Entertainment Earth. There's a lot of other ones on there. And just by clicking those links, we get a small percentage of the sale from you purchasing those items that you're going to purchase anyway. And it doesn't cost you anything extra. It just is a small commission that we earn on passing you as a customer along to those retailers. So please take a second to use those links, because it really does help the website and support the podcast. With all of that being said, be sure to check out thebatmanuniverse.net for all kinds of news related to merchandise, video games, comics, television, and everything else related to the Bat fandom. In addition to that, we have Twitter, Facebook, we have a Facebook group, Instagram, Discord, YouTube. We're all over the place. We have all of those links over on our website, thebatmanuniverse.net. And if you have anything that you would like to either share with us, or you'd like to have a specific topic talked about on a future episode, be sure to leave your suggestion either through email, tbu@thebatmanuniverse.net, or you can send us a comment on the podcast post either on YouTube or on our website. We will consider those suggestions for future episodes. With all of that being said, for BJ and myself, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the TBU podcast, and we'll see you guys next time.